Hi, everybody. It's Dr. Monica Davern here with Blueberry, here for another roundtable with two of our fabulous pediatricians this morning, talking about summer safety and travel. So do you guys want to start? Jamilet, do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Jamilet Alegria. I'm one of our Blueberry docs.
I'm Marisa Quattrone, another one of the Blueberry docs.
Amazing. So thanks for joining this morning. We are going to go through with summer on the rise. I think everybody has spring fever. People are planning their travel for the summer. The topic is really what we recommend as pediatricians and what are some of the most common questions that we get around travel in the summertime, how parents can be really well prepared to just keep their kids safe, have fun, more or less stick to their routines, all of those kind of questions we're going to go through today. So to open it up with a little bit of stats like we always do, it looks like 80% of U.S. parents actually say that they plan to travel with kids under 18 months this summer. I don't know the source on that, but I believe that. I think
That's
most
a lot.
people are trying to get out there. Road trips are still the most popular form of family vacation, with about 70% of families planning to drive, which is great. Air travel with kids is up. So 40% of parents say that they plan to fly with children this summer. And I think all of this, we did another roundtable that talked all about measles and how that is playing into everything this year, but we can kind of mention that again today. I think it's still relevant. What are you guys planning for this summer?
My daughter requested Hawaii for kindergarten graduation.
Wow.
We're going to Oahu.
I love that. I'll have to pick your brain. I'm trying to plan for Hawaii next year.
This is what I did. My friend's a travel planner. I said, plan me a trip to Hawaii. And it just happened. She's like, give me a little more. I need a little more.
So do you guys, I mean, obviously you guys are going to fly to Hawaii. Do you normally fly with your kids or do you usually drive?
If it's anything over maybe 3.5 hours, I'm on a plane. I can't be in the car for very long.
Yeah, I'm like that too.
Yeah.
I'm like that
we road trip a lot because I live in Georgia. So Florida is like a 7-hour drive to most stuff we want to see in Florida. And so it's just cheaper and easier to drive when we're going somewhere, within a 7 or 8 hour distance. I will absolutely fly anywhere else. I think cost, flights have gotten really expensive. So cost makes me drive a little more than I normally would.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, that actually made me think of something too. So we have Marisa here, Dr. Marisa, who's like the tick queen, we call her, because she's our health expert on Lyme disease and all of tick-borne illness, which is so relevant for summer. So I think those that are listening are probably people that are thinking of traveling to the East Coast may or may not be aware of what to look out for, why tick-borne illness matters, how they can protect themselves and their family. So maybe we can start with a little bit of that, if you want to give us some background. And we'd be remiss if we did a summer safety talk without talking about Lyme disease and what that is. So since we have Dr. Marisa here, she's just going to give us a little bit of context and background on what Lyme disease is and why we worry about it.
Absolutely. So Lyme disease is the name of an illness caused by Borrelia burgdorferi, which is transmitted usually in a deer tick. It causes a variety of symptoms. There's various stages. So in stage 1, a lot of times it is that familiar bullseye rash. So it'll start out as like a little red circle that enlarges into a target type rash. Usually it starts at the site of the tick bite, whether or not you ever saw the tick in the first place, because they can be easy to miss. You can have low-grade fevers, headaches, joint pains, fatigue. So those are kind of symptoms of stage 1 Lyme. If it's unrecognized, or sometimes, it doesn't really present until it's in stage 2, you can have more symptoms, including, multiple bullseye lesions across the body. It can progress into neurologic symptoms and even like a full-blown arthritis. And the treatment of Lyme depends on what stage we pick it up in. In stage 1, it's really a clinical diagnosis. The labs would not show Lyme in most cases, so you would just get treated. Stage 2 and 3, there are lab tests you can do to officially diagnose or make sure that's what you're dealing with.
Got it. Well, I hope it's helpful. Yeah, I know, because I feel like there are such great destinations on the East Coast, but I don't know. I feel like as mom that doesn't live out there, I'm like scared because my kids are so woodsy. They just are always getting into stuff and they're digging in the dirt all the time. And I just get a little bit paranoid about it. Do you feel like that's
Yeah.
valid or should I not be worried?
I think that the benefits of being outside and being in the woods definitely outweigh the risk of, I guess what I'm saying is I wouldn't keep them out of nature for that reason. We're big nature people around here. You just have to do what you can to prevent, like we mentioned, and also, just do a thorough tick check at the end of each day and just make sure you're checking your kiddo all over, including, in the hair, in the scalp.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Can we talk about prevention a little more? You talked about clothing and kind of tucking in your pants and wearing long sleeves and all of that. What about insect repellents? Like, what are the best choices for ticks?
So, I'm very big on following the environmental working group, the EWG, and, that comes into play with a lot of things, sunscreens, things like that. They do say that DEET-based bug repellents are safe over 2 months of age, and picardin-based over 6 months of age for mosquitoes and ticks. So it is a good idea to use those sprays as well in terms of tick prevention when you're in a really endemic area.
And you mentioned
Yeah,
that your daughter has had it once. Is it possible, like, do you get any sort of immunity if you've had Lyme disease? Or is it possible to just get it over and over?
Technically, you can get Lyme disease again. The duration that the antibodies would show up in blood work is variable. So you can technically get Lyme disease again. I know chronic Lyme is kind of a hot topic. In general, Lyme is very, very treatable in any stage. The topic of chronic Lyme is a little different. It's not well understood. A lot of doctors believe that the Lyme has been treated. It's not actually active Lyme disease. Maybe some people have a rheumatologic response after the fact, but actual Lyme disease is highly treatable. And so I always reassure parents of that.
Awesome.
that's great.
Cool. Well,
And you
thank you.
mentioned,
Of
yeah,
course.
you mentioned as far as like prevention, I'd like to talk about this a little more because I think a lot of parents are really afraid to use like chemical insect repellents on their children.
Absolutely.
And there's a lot of, ideas about natural options. And while I'm a little crunchy myself, I know that most of those don't really help you prevent tick bites, right? Like they may be okay for mosquito repelling, but they aren't necessarily going to actually repel the ticks. And that's
Right.
what we worry the most about with Lyme. So, DEET and the picardin are the two that are known to prevent those. And I think it's important to know that.
Absolutely. Everything's a risk-benefit situation.
So here's a good question that we get a lot at my house is, as a pediatrician, what is in your travel kit? Like, what do you bring with you on trips? What are your essentials? What kind of stuff are you going to not leave home without? So what do you guys have in your suitcase?
Yeah, so I travel a lot, and so I kind of have like stuff already set aside so it's easy to grab. But I know that like you always need a Band-Aid when you don't have one. So bandages, antibiotic ointment, having that always on hand for any sorts of, cuts and abrasions and all the boo-boos, and even stuff that doesn't look like a boo-boo. We know kids want a Band-Aid. And so it's really important to always have the Band-Aids. I always travel with some sort of antihistamine. We like Zyrtec or cetirizine. That's always good to have on hand for whatever, maybe, especially when you go to a different environment. The allergens in the air and all of that can sometimes just affect you differently. And my kids and I are both, we get allergic reactions to stuff really easily as far as like environmental things, just like the itching in the hives. So, so always have that on hand. And then we always have something like Tylenol, Motrin on hand for anything that might be hurting, or, heaven forbid, there's a fever, some sort of illness that happens while you're abroad. So those are like the basics. I also always have some anti-nausea medicine with me because the worst thing is vomiting on a trip. So actually, I just got back from Japan with my daughter, who's 12. And the second night we were there, she threw up, and we went through some Zofran, and it helped. And, she was better by the next day. I think it was just jet lag / food, and everything was different, and it just caught up with her. But I was really glad to have some of that with me.
Yeah.
I always tell my families to make sure they bring their blueberry kit.
Yeah.
So if they're going to a place where, where we are and we're licensed. But just in general, it always helps to have a thermometer too, I think.
Yep, and that otoscope is priceless when you're suddenly got the ear pain when you're not home.
Absolutely. That's what'll happen.
Yeah. And of course, like, just a reminder, pack the normal medications. If your kid takes a medication daily or even as needed, you just want to make sure that you have it. All the inhalers that they're normally prescribed, even if they're not having any kind of a breathing issue or asthma exacerbation.
Yes.
You don't want to be stuck without it. Just make sure that you have it.
In your carry-on bag, never ever
in the
check
carry-on. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I pack is, and maybe I'm just a germaphobe, but I pack wipes and hand sanitizer and more wipes and more hand sanitizer, and I in my little crossbody bag, and I am wiping my children and their surfaces all the time. So that's the other thing. I think, like, as you travel, we usually fly as well, mostly because my husband and I don't sit well in a car. But, on the plane, it's like there's germs everywhere and kids are touching everything and they have to be entertained and they're just, interested in all these new things in these new, like, places. So hand sanitizer and wipes. And then, of course, soap and water as often as possible. It's not always possible, but
absolutely. Do you wipe down the tray tables on the plane when you get on there?
Oh, I'm wiping down everyone. I'm wiping down, like, the empty seat next to me before the person sits down. I'm wiping down the window. The other thing that I always pack too is just a spare change of clothes for both of my kids and for me, because you just never know. Like, thankfully your daughter threw up at the hotel, but sometimes you're not that lucky, and it just happens in the middle of everything, and everybody needs to change. So those are like the 2 cents that I would have to add, but other than that, I agree with everything else too.
My carry-on always has a change of clothes for everybody, and I'm extra. I don't check bags often, but I always want to have, like, at least a day or two's worth of stuff that I need just in case the bag doesn't show up.
I'm going to start doing that. To piggyback on your sanitation methods, public bathrooms are not my favorite. And I did a talk on potty training the other day, and I was surprised that the parents and even the doctor I was with didn't know about the little adhesive covers that can go on the public toilets that kind of drop down in the front, and so you can sit your kid on there and not worry about them touching all the parts of the toilet.
I didn't know about this.
Yeah, they make really pretty ones, different designs, and then you just throw it away.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
Perfect. That's awesome. Okay, maybe we can move on to, like, routines. So I think another common question is, and maybe you can speak to what you did, Jamilet, like when you went to Japan. But I think one of the big parts of travel with kids is that the routine is sort of out the window in some cases, or alternatively, you're, like, planning your entire vacation around your kid's nap schedule, which is also not very fun. So what do you think would be the best mindset, or what's the best strategy to keeping everybody more or less on the routine, but also not ruining, your plans or foregoing all the fun of a vacation?
Yeah, so as far as that goes, I always talk about travel as this is not your normal day, this is not your normal life, it's not your normal schedule. So being somewhat flexible is going to be important, and just realizing that your kid may not nap as well because you're in a different place or a different time zone, and just kind of running with it. Traveling with smaller kids is very different than traveling without kids or traveling with older kids. And you just kind of have to plan for a lot of downtime and plan for just a lot of resting, and just don't overplan the day so that there's not as much disappointment if you didn't get to do something because there was a huge meltdown, and just kind of, like, realize that you're going to have to go with the flow a little bit. Some people really try to stick to very specific nap and sleep schedules, and that's great if it works, but it's not always easiest to do, and it could just make it feel like you're not on vacation when everybody has to be quiet in a dark room so that your kid can have their 2-hour nap that they need to have, right?
Yeah.
Versus just like, hopefully they fall asleep in the stroller while you're walking around, and you'll just let that be the nap, and that's okay.
Yeah. And I think too, just realizing that when you come home, it's actually not that hard to sort of reinstate the routine. If you've been on this really great schedule, it's not going to ruin it. If you go on vacation and you let your kid car nap every day instead of giving them their decent 2 hours, it's going to be fine. And so just, you're making memories that are going to be core memories forever. So don't worry. It's all good. Just, try and be present and roll with it. I think that's good.
Yeah. Just trying to have fun and just realizing that what you think you have to get done because you're at this perfect location is not necessarily what has to happen, and that other things can be just equally fun and equally exciting. And what's exciting and fun to the kids is going to be totally different than what we want to do. So we just have to find a balance where everybody gets to do a little bit of what's important to them.
Yeah, totally. Do you guys have any products that you really liked? I have some, but I'm not actually sure if they're if they've been canceled or not. It's been a minute since I used them. So I don't know if it's actually PC for me to mention them, but when we would travel with my little one, it was really helpful to put this, it was called what was it called? Slumber Pod. I don't know if so for the record, I don't know if this has been canceled, if it's still a safety thing or if it's not, but it worked really well for us. The Slumber Pod is not an option anymore. You can always get a blackout adhesive that you can stick it to the window. But I really liked the Slumber Pod for him because it made him feel like he was in his own little cocoon. My kids have always slept in their own room, in their own bed. And so for us, that was really nice to have because it's this complete blackout tent that you put over a crib. And so when they're in there, you can turn the lights on in the room and do your thing, pack, get ready for the following day once your baby has already gone to bed. So that was really helpful. We also always travel with the sound maker for our kids just because they're used to it, and it really helps make them feel like they're in their sleep space. And the stuff that they sleep with, their stuffed animals, the little things that trigger their brain for sleep if they use a sleep
special
sack.
blankie.
Yeah, the special items and stuff like that. So those can all be really helpful in kind of getting them queued up for sleep, even if they're in a new environment.
Yeah, and always bring extras of everything because something always gets left behind. So if there's 2 special blankies, bring 2 just in case.
Yeah. Any pro tips for coping with jet lag in littles?
It's hard. There's a 13-hour time difference between where I live and Japan. So it took us a good solid 2 to 3 days for us to not feel completely turned around. And obviously it affected my daughter way more. And it even, she had some nausea and vomiting from just the exhaustion, I think, and the different food and all of that. So it's hard. Everybody has different ideas about it. It's really hard to deal with in children. And I think that you just have to know that if you're changing time zones more than 2 or 3 hours, they're just going to be off and they're going to want to sleep at their normal body time, and it's not going to be time to go to bed yet, and they may just have to go to bed early a few days. Some people try to keep themselves on the same time zone when they go somewhere. So if we were to go to the West Coast with a small child and normally they're asleep by 8, maybe 3 hours early, everything kind of gets pushed early. So you start your day really early, you go to bed earlier than normal. That's something that some people wish to do. I don't like to end my day at 5. So, I think that just kind of pushing some limits as far as staying up a little longer, trying to stay awake that first day and not sleep it off all day long kind of gets you there faster. That's not always possible with a kid. They're just going to fall asleep standing up sometimes. So I don't know. It's tough. I think that you just have to be prepared for it not to be very easy, and that you just have to give it a couple of days to adjust and not plan a lot those first couple days, and just know that there may be some naps needed and some rest.
Yeah. I feel like I'm always hopeful that my kids will still be on. I mean, we just went to Florida and I'm like, oh, this is going to be so great. They're going to sleep in till 9. And no, they still get up. It's somehow they know that it's 7 where we are. It drives me crazy actually, but whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, do we want to mention any summer tips for people at home that are not going anywhere? I think it's probably worth talking about swim safety, pool safety.
Yeah.
One of the stats I had here was actually that the majority of drowning and swim-related accidents actually happen when the family is not swimming. So if you have a pool in your backyard, it's those times when actually nobody's back there that are the most dangerous. So kind of shifting what we're talking about a little bit to safety at home or safety maybe once you get to where you're going, if there's a pool at the house where you're staying or something like that, just really keeping your kids close to you, knowing where they are, knowing when they get in the pool, and making sure that they're swim safe, whatever that means to you and for your child. So, like life jackets, floaties, supervision, swim skills, all that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I think that having your non swimmer child within arm's length at all times when you're in the water is like floaties. I don't trust. Even a life jacket is great, but you don't trust. Like you really just need to be arm's length all the time. I think that's just required until they're independent swimmers. And even when they are independent swimmers, if they're young independent swimmers, they're still going to possibly struggle. So just always being there, either right there in the water or at the edge, is important. I think that it with big large crowds of people, and that's often when kids can get missed, and there may be a lifeguard, but it's just we have a community pool. It gets crazy in the summer. There's so many kids in there, and they can easily go from where they think they're okay to the deep end, and it can be scary. So just always having them arm's length. Don't trust any flotation device. They can fail. Kids can still end up face in the water. I was just gonna say, like, what about like preparation and swimming lessons, and what do you guys recommend for that?
It's very important. I started my daughter as an infant in swim lessons. It's her favorite thing, actually.
Oh, I love it. Awesome. I love it.
I think it's the AAP, recommends, I think the recommendation is a little dated, honestly. I can't remember if it's 6 months or a year, but that I think they recommend a year. But really, I think the consensus now is to start sooner if you're able to, especially if you live in a state where pools are common or if you have one in your house or your backyard. I live in Colorado, so here it's like much less relevant because our pools, unfortunately, are only open like 3 months out of the year. But we tend to go to the ones that are like zero entry, where the kids can kind of walk in and play in the water, and they never are, there's not really any water available to them that's deeper than they are tall. So thankfully it's a little easier where I am, but definitely I think swim lessons are worthwhile. Some people do, that ISR, the infant self-rescue, where basically the kid learns how to respond to being thrown in the pool. Over. Yeah. With all their clothes on. Like, I think the final test is like you have them come in a winter jacket and they just toss them in, and the kids survive. It's amazing. But it's, my dad talks about, he's like, it's a life insurance policy. He's like, it doesn't matter how much you pay for swim lessons, like you are protecting your child's life forever, and you're teaching them these skills that are, worthwhile. And I have to say, where we are, my woodsy kids, there's a park by our house that's beautiful, and it's like in this canyon, and there's a river. My son, my 3-year-old, has fallen in like 3 times. Wow. And the last time he did it, maybe people will get a kick out of this story. I like put my kids next to the river as a very responsible mother. They were like right on the water's edge, which normally it's not that deep. But I said, come, like, I want to take your picture. Stand there and hold still. Well, my 5-year-old turns around to try and like put his butt to the camera, basically. And he's laughing and laughing. And my 3-year-old goes to do the same thing, and like head first just falls into the river completely.
Oh, no.
And he was like in a full winter jacket and everything. And somehow like my ER brain kicked on. I like put my phone on the shore or whatever, just jumped in to get him, pulled him out. Thank God. Like, he held his breath. He popped his head right up. He was completely fine. And he's actually not a kid that would ever try and swim independently. Like, he's scared. He doesn't like to put his head under. So he was obviously really mad. But when I got out, I realized like it was waist deep water. I mean, I was wet up to my pants were completely wet. And so it's just, for me, it was like a nice reminder of, okay, like we have put the kid in swim lessons. My kids don't enjoy them, but it's worth it. It's a fight worth fighting for sure.
And it can happen anywhere, right? Like, that's, you may not have a lot of pools, but you have rivers, you have streams, you have lakes and just any body of water is a risk for
Absolutely.
drowning. My daughter we were in Florida visiting family, and it was like the end of the day, and everybody had started to go inside. She was out of the water. Everyone was out of the water. I was inside. There were probably like 6 other family members outside, and she was walking by the edge of the pool. She was maybe 3 or 4, fell in, and she had been in lessons. And everybody like saw it, and they were ready to go in and rescue her, and she like flipped herself over, kind of like swam herself back to the edge with her head, kind of.
Amazing.
So that's what they teach them, is like flip over and float and kind of move yourself until you get to somewhere where you can get some help. And so it's like they practiced it so much in these lessons that the instinct helped her. Now, she would have been rescued regardless. Everybody was ready to jump in, but she got herself to the edge because of the lesson. So definitely recommend
Absolutely. And we have a fence around our pool that's, you can kind of, it's like a netting kind of fence. But I do not ever walk away from that pool without it in place, and also extra bungee cords, not even for 1 second. So I think things can happen so fast that as much as like I want to go in and grab a drink or something, I always have that fence up and bungee cord to the pole. But and then another thing, everyone's probably seen like those graphics going around with the colors of swimsuits that are considered more safe. So it's not something we think about a lot. We have this really cute swimsuit on our kids, but the bright colors really do help, especially in like the lake water or something like that you could identify them if they do fall in.
Yeah. That's really
great.
helpful. Bright pink magenta colors. It tends to work well for all water bodies.
Yeah.
So.
Awesome. Okay, should we talk about sunscreen recommendations?
Yeah, sun safety.
Right. Okay, sun safety. Yep. This is a big one. Okay, so obviously before 6 months of age, we recommend that kids just stay out of the sun. So that means hat, sunshade, rash guards, covering up as many skin surfaces as you can that's reasonably possible with the heat. So that little baby skin that is not fully developed, it doesn't have all the layers of normal grown-up skin or even big kid skin. It's still developing, and so it's extra prone to sun damage, but it's also not quite safe to put sunscreen on a child that's under 6 months. So that's how we kind of find the balance, is like you have to use a little bit on those extremities, like hands and feet, if you're going to be outside. I think that's probably okay to use the gentle baby ones, but in general, we want mostly UV protection in the form of clothing. And then after that, sunscreen every few hours, head to toe. What are you guys recommending?
Reapply. Yeah. So I'm a big fan of clothing as sunscreen as much as possible. So if you can have a long sleeve swimsuit or the rash guards for boys, to cover as much body area, surface area as possible without needing to continually worry about applying, because that's just going to protect them the most. But yes, I think that people are really good at applying when you're about to go out and do stuff, and then don't reapply all day long. And that's when you get the sunburns, right? So just reapplying every like 90 minutes or so, especially after swimming or after having been in the water for a while, dry off and then reapply. And so what are your tips on getting kids to cooperate with this? Because not all kids love getting sunscreen all over their body, right?
We got those DIY sticks, like the ones that are about this big, a couple inches high, that have like a rolly ball, or the ones that look like a stick of deodorant are a big hit at my house because the kids can do it themselves. And so they like to apply those everywhere. Like they'll do their whole face, and then at the end, I'll just kind of like come in and say, okay, cool, you just missed a couple spots. I'll just finish that up. And then for the rest of their body, I usually offer options like, do you want me to spray you? Do you want the lotion? Do you want to do the stick? And I think that always helps. I don't think it's ever that easy. I think most of the time I make sure they're in their car seats first, because then they can't run away. And then I just usually slather them there. If they're fighting me on it, I'll like buckle them in. I'm like, okay, great. And then just sort of do it as quickly as I can.
Yeah.
But those are the things that have worked for us. How about you guys?
Do you think the sprays get enough coverage? I always worry about that it's harder to know if you've covered all of their skin with the sprays.
I think if you use a lot, it's fine. I do. But I do see people that are just kind of like, and they'll do like a little line. It's like, no, you got to just really get crazy with it and just spray. I mean, if you can see where it's covered. I think they make some that like change color so you can see.
Yeah.
I don't know if they make a spray that changes color, but sometimes that's helpful too.
Use the positive motivation too. It's like, well, I'm sorry you don't like this, but this is something we have to do. So you get in the pool and have fun, or go to the splash pad, or run around outside. So yeah, my she's always been okay with it when I bring it up that way. She does prefer the stick for sure, especially for the face. But I think that positive motivation, like, we got to get through this stuff before we can go have all this fun.
Yeah. Can we talk about kinds of sunscreens and like SPF
definitely.
that we recommend?
It's a big one.
Yeah. And what does SPF mean, right? So maybe I should Google it again.
Sun protection factor.
Yeah,
so sun protection factor, which basically means it's like however many hours you can stay in the sun with that I actually don't know. Can we Google it?
I think it's minutes, right? So how many minutes you are safe to be out there before you can burn. But there's a lot of talk about like the 100 and 150, like once you get over a certain number, that's really not that much more effective or any different. So like the sweet spot's like 30 to 50, right? Or around, I usually buy at least 50. And then we just try to remember to reapply. But anything under 30 is probably not going to be the best choice especially for kids.
Yeah.
But then if you get over 50, you're probably not getting that much more bang for your buck.
Okay.
And then there's mineral barrier kind of sunscreens, and then there's chemical sunscreens. So for younger children, we recommend the mineral sunscreens. It's tough because those are usually really cakey and white, and right, and most kids don't love those, but those are generally the safest, and avoiding certain kinds of endocrine disruptors and things like that by using something like that. What are some brands that maybe aren't as thick and cakey? Like, I've always had trouble with that.
Going back to my EWG certified, my favorites are ThinkSport, and they make Think Kids and Think Baby and Badger. And ThinkSport actually last year or the year before came out with a clear. And so maybe that would be preferable. I didn't like it as much. I stuck with the cakey this year. But they are EWG certified as being safe. There's no harmful chemicals in them at all. So that's kind of my favorite. And it's really good for kids with eczema and sensitive skin as well. So ThinkSport is kind of my go-to that I recommend to my families.
I like that. Badger is one that I've recommended for a long time, and they have really good like unscented and sensitive skin versions. And then there's a brand called Babo. I think that's how you say it, Babo. That one spreads on a little easier. I've noticed. I have a friend who loves that, and so I've used hers before, and it kind of spreads more easily. It's hard to convince kids with like darker, and even adults with darker skin and pigmentation, to use the really white sunscreens. Like my son is very much darker than I am, and he just he refused to use any of the mineral sunscreens because it kind of turned him into a purple color, and he just wasn't into it. Yeah, so maybe the clear version would be one to try for someone with darker skin. Yeah. I mean, for me, I'm so pale to begin with that it doesn't really change too much. So
yeah, and then keeping in mind too, like the ones that are waterproof, the mineral ones are nice. They tend to be really hard to get off, so they don't really wash off in the water. The spray ones, though, as long as you're like, you have to make sure you're using a sport or a water resistant one to know that it's going to stay on when they get wet. And then just know too that if your kids are little and they are going to be crying at some point throughout the day, you're going to be wiping their face. That's going to wipe off the sunscreen too. So if there's moments like that, just remember to reapply and do your best afterwards.
Yeah. After eating and getting food all over.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, cool. So I think we covered a great variety of topics. The only thing I have written down that I wanted to mention is that those long days that you're out in the sun, just make sure everybody's drinking lots of electrolytes, stay hydrated. Everybody enjoy your summer. I hope this was helpful. Thank you so much for joining me today. And we're all here on social, so I will have everybody's links in the notes of the show. And we're just so happy that you listen. So you can find us anywhere that you listen to podcasts. Please recommend this to your friends and have a wonderful summer with lots of safety and lots of fun.
Yes. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you all for tuning in to today's episode. Be sure to subscribe to the show for more episodes. And if you love the show, if you haven't already, please be sure to leave us a 5-star review.